Good afternoon, welcome, and thanks for joining us for today's HIS Talk webinar, A CMIO's Perspective on a Successful 25-Hospital Rollout of Electronic Physician Documentation. It's brought to you by Crossings Healthcare Solutions. I'm Lori from HIS Talk, and I'll be moderating. Our speaker today is Ori Lotan, MD. Ori is the Chief Medical Information Officer at Universal Health Services and Crossings Healthcare Solutions. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ori.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you today. As mentioned, I'm a CMIO with UHS and Crossings, which I'll tell you about here shortly. I've been in this role for about 7 years. And prior to that, I practiced for 10 years, primarily as a hospitalist, but I also had an office practice. And my background is that I have board certifications in internal medicine and in the newer subspecialty of clinical informatics. So the learning objectives for today will be to describe some of the benefits of utilizing a cloud-based voice recognition platform to successfully implement physician documentation, identify the main events that will contribute to a successful implementation of a physician documentation project, and also to be able to quantify expected transcription reductions after completion of a successful physician documentation project. And I've included some helpful hints on where those lie. A little bit about our parent company, UHS. We own and operate acute care hospitals across the U.S. We have 26. Those are the green dots that you see. We also have a behavioral health division that operates over 200 behavioral hospitals in the U.S. and the U.K. That is sort of outside of the scope of what we'll be talking about today. We also have UHS is the parent company of another company called Crossings Healthcare Solution that's also headquartered here kind of in a suburb of Philadelphia. And we actually created this company a couple of years ago because we were getting a lot of requests from outside of UHS for some of the software we were developing, which I'll share with you today. In essence, we develop advanced clinical decision support to try to improve system usability for physicians and for nurses. And we follow the best practices of Cerner, which is the vendor that we have. And we basically want to make whoever is using the software, be it within UHS or outside UHS, very successful with it, so we're able to offer whatever services are necessary to get that done. We want to treat you like one of the family, as it were. So a little bit about UHS. We have 3 production domains, East, Central, and West, and that corresponds to each of the time zones that our facilities are placed in. We divided our inpatient implementation into a number of phases. The first phase was really the core clinicals and then fully automating the ED, which included CPOE and physician documentation. We went back around to all the hospitals in phase 2 and did inpatient CPOE with a little bit of a progress note as well. We achieved about a 70 to 90% voluntary adoption of CPOE. And that brings us to phase 3, which is our physician documentation project. We started planning for it in early 2014 after doing the first 2 phases. And the situation we found ourselves in was that physicians were mostly using dictation, though some were using an electronic progress note that we had put in phase 2, and some were writing progress notes in the chart. So we had really a hybrid chart where some of the information was in the EMR and some of the information was in paper record, and then the information that was in the EMR was using different platforms. And clearly this is not really the most ideal solution that you have. We really wanted to get everyone into the EMR as much as we can and then build on that. And another challenge that we have is that we have approximately 6,000 active medical staff in these 26 hospitals, but we only employ about 350. So over 95% are these independent physicians who often split with competitor hospitals in our market. We really didn't have very much leverage over them. And so we took it as a challenge to try to sort of build a better mousetrap, build a better experience for them. And these were all the thoughts that were kind of swirling through our head as we were trying to get going for the phase 3, which we wanted to start really at the end of 2014. So we first looked at different documentation platforms. We're a Cerner shop, so we were looking within Cerner. And if you're familiar with Cerner, you have clinical notes, which are sort of the legacy notes. You have PowerNote, which is what we had some experience with because we installed that in the emergency department. But Cerner had come out in early 2014 with a new platform called Dynamic Documentation that we thought was promising. The challenge that we had was that, number one, it had a lot of gaps. So it didn't have certain sections built out yet. For example, it didn't have an assessment and plan section, so you really can't complete a note. It didn't have a discharge note. So it had gaps that sort of prohibited it from being our go-to solution. There was also complexity around different specialties workflow. So a hospitalist workflow when documenting is different than a surgeon's, is different than a subspecialist. Again, it didn't seem to be entirely as intuitive as we wanted. So we thought there would be opportunity to improve efficiency, reduce clicks, improve navigation. And then kind of having our informaticist hat on, we wanted to embed clinical decision support. We wanted to embed quality advisors. We wanted to really leverage the platform to do the kind of things that you want to do with health information technology. So this is kind of where we were at when we were contemplating all of this. And then as I mentioned to you before, we wanted it to be a better system than the doctors were experiencing in other hospitals, because technology is such an important satisfier or dissatisfier for physicians when they come. They spend more time with generating their note typically than they do seeing their patient. So we're very fortunate to have a robust clinical informatics team that our CIO has been building here for a number of years. So we have 4 full-time physicians. We have 9, soon to be 10, full-time nurse informaticists. And we also spent time recruiting and sort of developing software developers, some of whom had come from Cerner, a lot of whom were just really sharp. And our approach was actually to leverage the Cerner MPage development toolkit and the best practices and create software that we knew would fill in the gaps and then improve dynamic documentation. So we actually built 10 components and about 60 smart templates. And I'm going to share some of this with you just because you're probably interested. And we built all that out before we rolled out our project. And we are really honored to have some minor recognition with innovation awards for the kind of work that we've done. So what I'm going to actually do next is show you a little bit as opposed to tell you, which I think is a little bit more powerful, some of the things that we built, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the project. So just to kind of orient you, I've logged on to my patient, and at the very top of the table of contents, we embed a tab called Workflow MPage. And our goal now actually is for the doctors to do all the work from within the Workflow MPage. We don't want them navigating around all these different tabs. So we have the Workflow MPage at the top. We ask them to hide the table of contents to give them a little bit more work space. And then we actually have all the work they need to do out of 3 tabs. So for the first note that they'll do, it'll be the admit or consult. For all the progress notes, it'll be the manage. And then the discharge summary will be the discharge. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to show you all of dynamic documentation. That usually takes me about 45 minutes. But I will show you some of the components that we built and give you a flavor for what we're doing to try to improve the experience. So at the top of each of these workflow MPages is a component called Note Settings, which you see here. And what these are smart templates. And you can hover over each one to give you a description of what it is that they'll pull in. And you can click on it if you want to see what it'll pull into your note. So the idea here is this is a one-time setup done at the end user level. So for each physician, we sit and ask them, what do you always want in, for example, your admission and consult notes? And all they have to do is go and check it one time, or if they don't want it, they can uncheck it. And this will automatically pull this information into your note. So one, kind of good use case is labs. So within Cerner, you have to go and individually tag every lab every time if you want it in your note. But in our setup, all you have to do is click Recent Labs one time. It'll always pull in the labs from today and tomorrow into your note. And using this automation, you can probably populate about half of your note just with structured data that's already in your electronic medical record. So as I mentioned, every doctor can make these selections. You'll notice that there's some specialty-specific ones. So as an example, if I'm an OB, I may want the pregnancy history, right? But if I'm not, I don't. So I don't check it. So you do this, you click Save. It'll collapse the component. And then if you really don't have to interact with it anymore unless you want to make a change, in which case you click to update it. So this is a very popular tool with our clinicians. The second thing we built is something called auto text sharing. So auto text is a large quantity of text that usually doesn't change very much that you want to be able to put into your note quickly. For example, a normal physical exam. So you see here in the center, we have my auto text, and here on the right is the details. And if I type ... n, it'll bring me a selection of my auto text, and if I double-click normal physical exam, it'll drop all this text into my note. So our innovation is that you can look for other providers' auto text. So I'm going to type in a provider here in the box, Dr. Yaruva. When I click on him, I see all of his auto text here on the left. And if I see an auto text that I like, for example, here's his review of systems, and I like it, I want it to be my review of systems, all I have to do is click this copy button, and now it becomes my review of systems. So I have it available for me. So before we go and convert a site, we'll sit and we'll create a lot of these auto texts, and then we'll instruct the doctors to go and look for their colleagues or a physician champion, et cetera, and they can very quickly get a lot of auto text of their own, and it really speeds up documentation. Okay. The next thing we developed, which is kind of cool, I'm scrolling down, is something called procedures and consults. So for a particular encounter, you typically have procedures, you have images, you have consults coming in. You want to include them in your note, but you don't want to include them in totality. You'll get a 20-page bloated note that nobody can read. So we have actually a couple different workflows that you can use. So I'll use images as an example here. We'll pull whatever procedures, images, and consults are available into this component. And if you hover over them, it's a hyperlink. And then there's a couple different ways you can include it in your note. You can click on it and you can view it, and then you can just sort of copy and paste the piece that you want in your note. So in this example, I'm going to include just the impression. And this will actually, you only need to do this once, and it'll retain it, and it'll retain it all the way up to discharge. And this is helpful because oftentimes you'll have radiologists recommending a 3-month follow-up film or something like that, and you want to be able to include it here and then hand it off to another provider when you discharge the patient. So I click include, and it'll just drop this in the note. It'll be very compact. The other option is maybe I just want to include a synopsis or an impression. So for example, I click on the echo report. What's interesting to me is that the ES is 30% and that there's no wall motion abnormalities. So here I can just include a comment, and I would, for the narrative pieces, dragging the cloud-based works extremely well. So here I'll pull up my little dragon icon so you see that I'm using it. Ejection fraction 30% with no wall motion abnormalities. And it'll include that in the note. So that's a nice way to include all those things. Another thing that we built is something called document history. So document history, what it allows you to do is with one click, open up all the assessment and plan portions of all the notes. So typically, a doctor would go into a document, open it, expand it, scroll around, and look for the assessment and plan portion. And that's time-consuming if you have a lot of documents on the patient. So here, what we're trying to do just with one click is let's just open up all the assessment and plan portions so that we know what the doctor's medical decision-making was very quickly. Okay. The other thing that we built as we kind of scroll down here is assessment and plan. So one very nice thing here is we'll pull in all of your diagnoses. If there's a diagnosis that hasn't been documented, you can add it here, but it has an added feature. If you add a diagnosis that has quality measures associated with it, like an acute myocardial infarction, we will in real time open up this clinical decision support, and it'll tell you the status of the core measures. So you can see that you've met the requirement to have a beta blocker and an aspirin, and you can see because it detected these active orders in the EMAR. It did not detect these other two. And what it's allowing you to do is, for example, giving a medication if your heart muscle is weak. We've pulled the echo report right for you to look, and you see, oh, yep, the EF is 30%, so they qualify. And right in here, you can either place an order or document a contraindication. And the system is actually smart enough to know if you put in an order for a medication that is not an ACE or an ARB, it doesn't do much. But as soon as you put in a medication that is an ACE or an ARB, it'll pull up the formulary selections, and you can order it right from here. You can also order labs that are appropriate right from here. You can also document contraindications right from here. And then in here, you would dictate. So the role for dictation is typically kind of at the bookends of the note. So at the top of the note, where it's the chief complaint or the history of present illness, which is a narrative, and then at the bottom of the note here, where it's a narration of your medical decision-making. We'll consult cardiology for emergent cardiac catheterization. And this will pull it into my note. You see that we have links out to a VTE assessment. We have links out to discharge planning. We also give you the option, if you don't want to document a plan based on each diagnosis, you can do it based on a system. So for example, in an ICU, or if you have a patient with multi-organ failure, it's easier to do it by system. Still wheezing, we'll order vigorous incentive spirometry, ambulate BID, and start DUONEBS Q6. When I save that, it's going to ask me for the order sentence for the ACE ARB that I ordered, and that's just the normal ordering workflow. And now you see if there's any more orders for me to enter, I can do it right here. This is just the normal CPOE folders. And then I go and I create my note. So what you'll notice with the note is pretty much everything on this right side here was auto-populated for me from the smart templates. You see the images, the echo and the x-ray fall in nicely in this little section here. And then up here, the assessment and plan, it pulled in the diagnoses, the status of the quality measures, and wherever I documented things, it pulled it in. And what I would normally have, really all that would have remained for me to do is to dictate an HPI, which I would have done earlier. I would normally drop auto text here, insert normal review of systems. Insert normal review of systems. Insert normal physical exam. And so you can very quickly generate your note. I'll show you a few more things. On the progress note, again, this would be for progress notes. Again, we have the note settings. These are going to be a little bit different. Because, for example, on an H&T or consult, you may want the home medications. But now on a progress note, you want the inpatient medications. And then a discharge, maybe you want the discharge medications. So you configure these smart templates a little bit different based on the workflow. We have a couple new features here that I want to share with you that are good. One is something called physician communication. So what we found is that at times, physicians weren't renewing medications on a timely basis, and they were dropping off the MAR, and the patients weren't receiving them. So we actually pull up all the medications that are expiring by policy and restraints as well face up. And you can hover over them to get the details. And then right from this little component, you can decide if you want to allow them to expire or you want to renew them. So you can interact with them right from this little component. And then when you click Submit, it'll actually go and sign them with one click and open you up to the next tab. And the next tab is actually quality measure. So we'll pull in anything that can cause a central bloodstream infection or catheter-associated infection, like a urinary catheter or a central line or a PIC. And we're going to ask you, do you want to discontinue it or continue? And if you continue, we're going to ask you for a reason from an approved dropdown. We'll just ask you the first day, but then we'll carry it on to subsequent days. So then you can submit that. It's going to put in the order to discontinue the catheter. It's going to document the reason to continue the central line. And here we have a communication. So these are non-disruptive communications to the clinician. So this would be on a paper chart. This would be like a yellow sticky label, please call the daughter, or please adjust the antibiotic. In Cerner, they recommend that you utilize a message center. But the challenge for the clinicians who are messaging the doctor is they may not know whose message center to send it to, and that doctor may not read the message center, which is more like email, before they see the patient. So here we tie all these communications to the patient. Anyone who has a relationship with the patient can see it. And then what we ask is that if you're going to take action, that you acknowledge it. And that will take it off everybody's list. So if I'm going to call the daughter, if I'm going to adjust the antibiotic, I will click submit. And then everyone can see that because they have a little acknowledge folder that, hey, Dr. Lotan's going to adjust the antibiotic, Dr. Lotan's going to call the daughter. Let's say I intended to call the daughter, but I never got a hold of her and I'm going off shift. We actually built a little undo button. I can click the undo button because I'm not going to be here tomorrow, and someone else knows, hey, someone still needs to call the daughter. Now, if you're a specialist, for example, maybe you're just managing the antibiotics, and you're not inclined to be adjusting the diet or ordering the DME, you can ignore the communication, which basically means it's not really relevant to you. And when you do that, it moves it to a little folder that just you see. This ignored one is only visible to you. For everyone else, these communications are up here in pending. So this little package, this little physician communication package, is what I call sort of your housekeeping. What do you want to do about the medications that are going to expire? What do you want to do about the restraints that need to be renewed? What do you want to do about your central lines and your catheters? And all these communications, the most efficient way to get them done is you're here, you're seeing the patient, you're thinking about him, you're generating your note, spend a few minutes and do it here. Otherwise, there's a decent chance you'll get interrupted later when you're in the OR or when you're in your office or seeing another patient, and now you're distracted and you're trying to think about this patient, and it's just not optimal patient care. We also built another little component we call order history down here, which is basically all the relevant orders kind of in reverse chronological order. You can expand it by 24-hour increments, and you can see them. And it's helpful because the orders are grouped right next to each other. And so, for example, if you scroll and 4 hours ago you see there was a chest X-ray and an EKG and a dose of Lasix, you're thinking maybe they had some difficulty breathing or something. It can sometimes be lost if the orders sit in different folders. So we did that. And the last thing I want to kind of show you here that we developed is something called a hospital course. And this has two use cases. This is sort of an ongoing narrative of the patient's course. And it's very helpful if I'm going off service and someone else is going on service and they want to understand my thinking, they can just go right to the hospital course and kind of read the narrative. But also I'm going to push this into the discharge summary. And I can automate about 70–80% of your discharge summary if you keep up this hospital course. Because nothing is more painful than trying to go over 3 weeks of what happened when you pick up the patient. It's much easier to just do it on a daily basis. So I would, for today, I would just continue kind of this ongoing dialogue. On hospital number 4, the patient was doing well and cleared for discharge by cardiology. And that's done. So I'll show you just a few more things on the discharge. The note settings we talked about, the discharge diagnoses. So I will automatically pull these for you. The diagnoses tend to be encounter specific. The problems tend to be, there's some nursing problems here, like at risk of pressure or sore. So we're not going to assume you want it in the note, but if you do, you just click here and you can have it. If there's any diagnosis that you're treating that you don't see here, maybe the patient had depression, you can just add them here on the fly, and it'll automatically drop them into your discharge summary. If it's now depression is going to be a chronic problem, you can just click here and it'll add it as a problem. So this interacts with the diagnosis and problem control in Cerner. So I just want to get everybody to basically reconcile their diagnoses. As I scroll down here, you'll see a couple of things that I want to share with you. You saw the images. This all carried forward, very helpful, particularly since I only had to document something once, and then if there's something that needs to be followed up, it'll be followed up on. We built a link to go out to medication reconciliation. So I can click here because I don't want them to leave the workflow MPage and go right and do my discharge medication reconciliation right from within the workflow MPages. Reconcile and sign, and I go right back to the workflow MPage. Any quality measures that you haven't addressed are going to show up here. I'm actually purposely not going to do them because I want to show you something here in a minute. the discharge orders show up here. We'll pull in your diet activity wound care code status. If you like it just as it is, all you have to do is click this little button and it'll copy it down here. You can enter your prognosis. You can enter your condition. If there's any follow-up, you can click here and go right to it. You see the hospital course I pulled in. And then when you're done, you just put in your discharge order. And here, because as you'll recall, there were some quality metrics that hadn't been met, and now I'm discharging the patient, that's it. I will pop up this core measure checklist, and you'll see continued discharge request is dithered out. So you really can't move through this until you basically turn everything green. So it's the same workflow that we did earlier. You're going to document a contraindication, or you're going to place an order, or convert a medication that you have as an inpatient to a prescription. Once you've done all that, then you can continue your discharge request. And in fact, something that the other members of the care team will see is actually a visual indication on the table of contents. So we overlaid an MPage on this. Normally it's just gray and white. But for us, we can add color, we can add icon, we can add hovering, we can add navigation. So just a visual indicator, a non-disruptive visual indicator that the discharge is done, the patient can go home, so the nurse can discharge the patient and improve throughput. So again, I can go through everything with you if anyone's interested. It takes a little bit longer, but you get the feeling for, I specifically focused on the 10 components and the 60 smart templates that we built and kind of embedded in this platform along with the Dragon Cloud, and that gives us a really robust physician documentation solution. And we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about what that looks like and some of the outcomes that we've had. So what I've done for you on our presentation is I've actually put in screenshots of everything that I've showed you, so you'll have access to that. It's much more fun to watch it dynamic live like I showed you, I think. So we'll continue from here. So one of the benefits that we've talked about that I think is really critical for physician documentation, particularly for folks who are doing dictation, is you've got to give them the ability to have voice recognition. We had experience with the Dragon Network Edition and the EDs. The cloud-based is much better. We use tethered power mics that we put on every workstation, and it works in noisy environments. It works with foreign accents. It works, it really is almost plug and play, as long as you have the right Citrix receiver and the power mic drivers installed before the doctors start using it. So here are our main events. Since we have 25, we actually have 26 hospitals. We did another hospital that we just finished building last week. We wanted a very structured methodology, and so that's what I'll review with you. We'll do a little deeper dive into each of these. But we had a kickoff about 4 months before, technical readiness about 3 months before, started doing the training about 3 to 4 weeks before, had an open house, which is where people could come in, get a little bit of just-in-time training, get some of their setup done a day or two prior. We provided 10 days of conversion support, and then we would love to go and do optimization. Typically, we haven't had the time to do that, but ideally we would, once the users have settled down, gotten over their learning curve, come back and show them some slightly more advanced skills. So let's spend a little bit more time on this. The kickoff, really our project management group handled. They wanted to be clear about the scope, the timelines, the expectations, both from our corporate IS department and from the facility. Then about 3 months before, we did facility readiness, and this was it was important to review the workstations, have everything installed, the wireless, single sign-on if it hadn't already been put in place. We just want people to have a very favorable experience. So I'll go out a little bit on a limb and talk about some technical aspects that I'm probably not qualified to discuss, but I know this is a primarily IS audience. So here are some of our technical recommendations. It is interesting that it's really a Windows, not a Mac supported configuration. We have noticed that some folks are using virtual desktop environments, and there are just some specific things you may want to be considering when you do that. as you do your planning, just to be aware of. We can spend more time with whoever wants to on this with our technical resources. Obviously, you want to have a robust network. We did elect to use the tethered power mics. We're on the Power Mic 3 for Dragon, so we did want to kind of have it on every workstation, and then we didn't want it to get lag, so we try to lock things down a little bit. As I've mentioned before, you want to make sure you get the drivers, the latest version of Citrix, so that everything works right off the gate without any issues, which has been our experience, been very favorable. So we would deploy the drivers about 3 weeks before conversion, and then put in the power microphones about 2 weeks prior, and just test everything and make sure everything was working properly before go live. At go live, basically, the docs tapped in or logged on. We did have a power chart with Dragon icon that we had them launch, so it simultaneously launched both the application and the Dragon. And then when they logged out, it simultaneously logged both out. So we just want to make it very easy for the docs to use. Again, sort of here on the right is what we've been primarily using. You do have the capability now to do the Power Mic Mobile. You can use that with Android and with iPhone. While we personally don't have a lot of experience with it, we are hearing good things from some of our partners that are using it. There are some things you want to consider, like having them use a local Wi-Fi network. It doesn't have the noise canceling capability, so maybe go to the part of the unit that's not too noisy. A little bit more of a lag, but it's actually working well in other sites, so that's certainly something to consider as well. Obviously, the doctors would love to use their own smartphone to dictate, but you have to give them some kind of voice recognition solution. The validation event, this was really something we did for the first few sites. We just wanted to validate that everything that we've put together is working. We wanted to interact with some of the high-volume users, so hospitalists, some of the key champions. So we took a CMIO and some analysts, and we sat with them, and we just wanted to validate that everything that we had put together in the lab would work for them. This was really something that we no longer felt the need to do after the first few conversions went by very smoothly. Training is important. We have several different roles. So we have dedicated trainers that are typically people that train people for a living. Then we have the super users who typically take care of patients, but during conversion, we do want to pull them in and help the docs at the elbow. And then we have the providers. We can't necessarily touch everyone, but we really make a concerted effort to touch the high-volume admitters, the hospitalists, the active medical staff before conversion. We did build web-based training, so we had an hour-long basic one, and then we had a 30-minute one for more advanced features. We pushed them out about 3 months prior to conversion, and we really encourage everyone to do them. The docs like web-based training. They could do them on their own time, and they don't have to come into the classroom, which is really difficult for them. So for the trainers, we did a 2-day class. We asked them to do the web-based training prior. We could do 12 or 15 participants per class. We trimmed that down for the super users to a 1-day class. Again, the web-based training before, 12 to 15 per class. For the doctors, we asked them to do the web-based training and then basically give us about 30 to 45 minutes to answer any questions that they have, and for us to sit with them and to set up their note settings pieces. That's very helpful. To teach them about the auto text tool, to show them how to use Dragon, and we really required that before we gave them their Dragon license. That's the minimum that we could really do. If people wanted to give us more time, that was wonderful, but we just had a real hard time, getting docs to commit to coming into the classroom. And I would highly recommend that no matter what you do, you have someone available during conversion to train doctors on demand. I was just at one of our facilities the other week, and 3 doctors fell through the cracks. They were all hospitalists. They all had to be trained. They were all in service that day. And it's just something that, you always have to do no matter what it seems. Then for Go Live, we had a command center. We actually brought quite a few resources, inclusive of one of our CMIOs or assistant CMIOs. So we would have a command center with all the different applications there. We had at the elbow support on the units. We had regular checkpoints, so we would meet with all the facility, and we would have kind of daily reports to share with them around adoption. We would focus on any people, process, technology issues, and then we would send out status email on a regular basis so everyone knew what was going on back here to the home office. In terms of super users, it's really important to find the people that are kind of comfortable clinically and have some credibility, but also learn the system enough and understand physician workflow enough to be able to help them. We tried to bring out-of-town super users from facilities that had just been converted or are about to be converted to help with the facility that's being converted. And we would meet with them at least once or twice a day, talk about what issues they were having, issue tip sheets, etc. So we try to keep them highly engaged. So we successfully converted all the hospitals in about 1.5 years. So it was a pretty fast-moving train. Again, this is more ideally, we would love to go back and do some optimization with the docs after they've had 6 or 8 weeks to get used to the system. Perhaps we'll be able to do that on a selective basis where the adoption hasn't been quite as high as we would like. This is just a resourcing issue primarily. Some of the lessons that we learned, it is a bit of a new concept for the docs to just go to the workflow MPage and view what they need to view, document, order, do medrec, respond to the quality alerts, etc. It's a new workflow for them. It takes them a little time to get used to it. That's okay. It is a more efficient workflow. The other is it's important to have the ability to have these tools that make it a lot quicker to document, like the auto text that I showed you, macros. Having those, we built out a bunch of them at the corporate level and pushed them out. We created tools to make it easy for doctors with one click to basically create their own. Those are important so that they're very efficient in their workflow. You obviously want to test the heck out of everything. You want to make sure that you've got a good technical environment, that everything's installed. We have a smart auditor tool that we use to basically troubleshoot any application issues. Hopefully we realize there's a problem before we get that as a report from the field. And now I want to share some outcomes with you because we're really quite pleased with them. So these are kind of some of our facilities arrayed out. And one goal we had was we wanted to reduce transcription by about 30% within a month. And this is all on a voluntary basis. So that's that red line. And as you see, all the facilities exceeded that. We had a stretch goal of 70% at 1 month, and a lot of the facilities achieved that as well. So basically, within a month, at an enterprise level, about 60–70% moved away from dictation to start using dynamic documentation. And as a CMIO, I always find this graph interesting because we have identical technology deployed at all these hospitals. And we had identical project management throughout. So where you see some of them in the 90s and some of them in the 40s and 50s, all just has to do with the alignment that we have with the facility physicians. Perhaps we have stronger IS personnel and clinical informaticists elsewhere. But again, from our end, everything was identical. And I guess we should be pleased that we got to where we did, but really quite a spread of adoption. We do have an academic medical center, GW. It's a little bit unique because they were using a niche documentation product called Salar. And we basically moved them off Salar into dynamic documentation within about 2 weeks. So we were really pleased with that. So that's what that kind of shows you. Within a couple of weeks, we're at 90–100%. And then we were able to reduce our transcription spend quite a bit. So in 2014, we spent about $4.5 million on transcription. And then in 2015, we were doing a lot of our implementations. You see that drop by about $1.2 million. And then now, 2016, we've got everybody pretty much on board. We've reduced it by about $3.5 million. This is helpful because obviously you have costs up front that are associated with drag in licenses, hardware. If you want to invest in maybe some tools to help optimize your experience. But this is a nice little ROI for us. So not the main reason we did the project, but obviously if you can have clinical and financial benefits, then that's really nice. The other thing that we did, which happened coincidentally to this project, is that there was a physician satisfaction survey sent out. And EMR satisfaction was actually the highest by 1 to 2 quartiles from everything else that was surveyed. So it really stood out. And as those of us who work in this field know, it's actually kind of challenging to have physicians satisfied with your technology. So we were really pleased with that. And then, you know, I think the reason the doctors were happy is because they understand that there's benefit to having real-time, legible documentation in the note. They like all the features that we built in that automated and reduced the amount of clicking and navigation they had to do. For the surgeons, they're able to immediately do their post-operative note in the PACU. So they don't have to do a brief note and then go to a full note and then go to the message center and sign it. They just do their note right away, very quickly, with a few clicks. And so that removes their duplicative work. So we've had 90–100% adoption from the surgeons, which I never thought I would say in this lifetime. Here are just some quotes that we got from our docs. They sent them to us, again, from surgeons and from folks that aren't typically singing our praises. So that's obviously nice. From a health system standpoint, I know it was really quick, but I hope you appreciate that we were able to embed efficiency tools, clinical tools, communication tools, quality tools right in the workflow. We've obviously talked about reducing transcription expense, improving physician satisfaction. We know that Cerner is a very busy company. They just have a lot of things going on. They may or may not be able to get to all the things that we need to focus on. So we, so we went ahead and did it, and we think that's the right thing to do. Really focus on usability for our physicians and nurses. If there are any questions, here's a little link to Susan, who's our Director of Business Development. She's happy to schedule time with you. We're happy to spend, typically it takes us about an hour to go through everything in great detail. I apologize if I rush through everything, but I do think I hit the 45-minute mark, and we do want to have some time for Q&A. So let me turn it back over to whoever is running this thing, and we're happy to take some questions.
That's me, Ori. Thank you. As a reminder to attendees, you can use the questions box on the GoToWebinar console to send your questions in. The first one is Dr. Lotan's MPage workflows available to new Cerner clients, or does each new client have to replicate his effort themselves?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So as mentioned, we have these 10 components that we built and about 60 smart templates. And they're actually very adaptable to any Cerner client. What we typically do is basically have a meeting of our minds between our informaticist and yours. We just need to understand where the data elements reside. But we are doing projects with other clients, including some of the largest clients within Cerner land, and are able to build all that out. So that's certainly something that's, everything that I showed you is certainly available to anyone who has Cerner as a platform who's interested in pursuing that.
Okay, thank you. What do you feel were the biggest satisfiers for the physicians of the Crossings developments as compared to the off-the-shelf dynamic documentation tools? So
I think what we tried to do was to make doing the right thing the easiest thing. So just go to this one, go to the top of here, click here, go to your first MPage and just work your way down. And here are some cool tools that we've put in it to make you more efficient. So we try to keep it very simple and very straightforward. And part of it's just because we can't get them in a classroom to train them as much as we would like. And part of it is just they're busy and they're overwhelmed, and it just needs to be simple as can be. So I think we were able to do that in a way that match their workflow. Since we have several doctors here on our staff, we understand their workflow very well. So I think between making it easy, understanding their workflow, and minimizing the training needs, that's how we were able to get really high adoption pretty quickly with you know, the lean team that we have to support them.
Have you made other developments to the Cerner EMR outside of physician documentation?
Yeah, so I spent this time really primarily on our physician solutions. We do have sort of a parallel effort in the nursing space. So we've built a lot of tools really for nursing. Don't have time to show you them today, but we built some. We're happy to if there's interest there. So we really do focus on usability for nurses. We built a variety of things that give you a lot of visibility around patient care and safety and quality metrics and clinical decision support and things of that nature. So we have a whole other offering in the nursing space that we're happy to advise people about if appropriate.
Can Crossing's developments be applied to organizations currently using dynamic documentation?
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, I think where we've found the greatest need is if you're already thinking about, I want to do something with physician documentation, and then I would recommend, if you're a Cerner client, I would highly recommend dynamic documentation. I think that's a great platform. I think you need to add to that some of the components that we have here and some of the workflow elements, and I think you need to add to that cloud-based Dragon, and then you can get a really nice package for your clinicians. I mean, what we've sort of heard is if you go and put in sort of Cerner dynamic documentation out of the box, you're getting about a 20 or 30% adoption from the docs. So I don't know if that would necessarily please me after going and doing a project and having only 20 or 30% adoption. What we've seen is when you add the other two pieces, these components and voice recognition, you can get it up to 70, 80% on a voluntary basis. And that's more where we kind of want to be when we're doing big projects like this. So that's kind of our take.
Okay, this looks like the last question. What were some of the technical lessons learned and challenges from the project?
I am actually going to let one of my technical colleagues take that because I'm not as technical as I could be. So, Zah, if you're on the line and you'd like to speak to that, Zah is our assistant director really over technology, and he put together the technology slides, and I think he'd be best suited to speak to that, if you don't mind, Zah.
Absolutely, Dr. Lotan. Thank you. To that question, I mean, there's one slide I think Dr. Lotan covered during the presentation as well. I think the key takeaways that I will probably highlight is creating some standards around desktops, microphones, and primarily the software deployment strategies. Obviously, the software that needs to be installed from Nuance at the workstation level needs to be married to the version that you have at the Cerner level or the Citrix level. So that's probably the key takeaway. Again, highlighting the software development, software deployment strategy, and standardization around the workstation and the microphones are probably the key takeaway and lesson learned.
All right. Well, that was our last question, so this will conclude the webinar. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Ori, for the interesting and informative presentation as well as the demonstration. As a reminder to attendees, watch your email for links to the recording of today's webinar as well as a PDF version of the PowerPoint presentation. We look forward to seeing you at our next HIS Talk webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.